Hello, everybody. Let's do a sound check. Sound check. Please let me know that the audio is good in both on X and on YouTube. Let's start with the sound check. Let me know in the replies that you can hear me fine on X, and let me know in live chat on YouTube that you can hear me fine as well. Welcome to Tesla Live, episode 251. I hope everybody had a really good Christmas and happy holidays. I hope you all have some plans for tonight or stay at home and go to bed at 10 p.m. Either way, happy holidays to everybody. Good. Looks like sound is good on X. And I think sound is probably good on YouTube as well. Let's see if ACDC is ready to come up since he asked for the space. Maybe we can, get a chat going. And until he comes up, let's look at the markets. Markets are flat. Dow Jones is flat. They kind of bounced a little bit in the last few minutes here. Nasdaq down slightly. S&P 500 down slightly. Nvidia, really Max 7 is leading the indices down today. Energy stocks are up because oil prices are up. Natural gas prices surged quite a bit. I heard that it might be the coldest winter in the last 200 years or something. But they pulled back a little bit today, so I guess we'll see. It's really interesting how these commodity prices move because there's really not much of a buffer zone in terms of inventories. So maybe natural gas prices will go up again if the winter proves as cold as people think, or maybe colder. And in that case, I would be looking to short natural gas. So I have a bunch of short positions. I have about a dozen short positions, maybe 2 dozen, and so somewhere dozen to dozen changes. And I'm also at a list that I'm kind of waiting for the right things to happen to go short more. I'm not really looking to go long on anything at this point. I think the macroeconomic risks are high and strengthening. And I think a recession um, is starting. So, well, with that positive note, ACDC, how are you?
Doing well, yeah, man. How are you?
I'm good. How was your Christmas?
Christmas is good. I was actually in Florida for Christmas, so it was a completely different vibe. It was like my first Christmas away from the winter of Chicagoland,
Hmm.
and it was completely different. Like tropical weather Christmas, but it was nice. I was surprised to see a lot of Teslas out in the part of Florida where I was. So
Really?
there's yeah, I was definitely surprised. There's a lot of adoption out there, and I guess it works. I mean, if it works for California, it works for Florida. They've similar climates. A lot of people, not a lot, but some people also had solar and stuff going on. But I think people are definitely taking advantage of it.
Yeah. Well, that's really good. I had the exact opposite experience. I went to Massachusetts for Christmas, and it was a white Christmas, which is always great. And I didn't see many temples. And of course, as the topic came up in my conversations, and I realized in Massachusetts, like I said in a tweet, it's like a first-degree felony if you buy a Tesla. People really frown upon it, and you can't really hide it. It's not like you're buying gum or choosing Amazon to take your delivery. When you get a Tesla, it's sitting in your parking garage. Everybody in the neighborhood knows. And man, people hate Elon so much over there. It's crazy. It's probably true across all liberal cities and states. But Massachusetts is one of the biggest, most liberal states, obviously. So,
I know you mentioned that in one of your tweets. So, how did you get that feedback? Was it like talking to the people that you were meeting around there, friends?
yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's uniform. Like, it's not like one or two people. Literally every person. These are all anecdotes, right? But if you have enough anecdotes and they all point to one thing, it's probably true that way. And I'll give you one example. So we're exchanging gifts. Okay. And this little kid, aged aged 6. He gets a space book. Okay, so he gets a space book. This book is supposed to be like the history of space exploration. All right, and I'm flipping, and I'm so excited. I'm like, this book is great. I think, and like every other boy, he's like this, just interested in space and rockets and everything. Um, he has built, like, he has kind of like a bit of an engineering mind. He kind of builds things, builds Legos and builds these models and everything. And he really gets into it too. He's like, just like we're like all having a good conversation, laughing and everything. And this kid's like in the corner building his, rocket, you know, just silent, super focused. And so he gets this book, and he got the same book from two people, which is like, that's how well known that this kid is so into space. All right. And I'm flipping through the pages because I'm excited too. Going through the pages, looking at the pictures, each page is like a different topic. And I'm like, waiting for SpaceX to appear in one of the pages, or Elon to appear, or Falcon rocket, or Falcon heavy launch, which is like probably one of the most incremental thing, amazing things I've ever seen in my life. The Falcon heavy launch, and it's just page after page. There's absolutely no mention or SpaceX or Elon. Okay, um, and and so I looked through, and the book goes through like 2022 or something. Okay, National Geographic book, by the way, 2022 or 2023. So it goes to like SpaceX has been around since 2003, and they've done great things like landing rockets and everything for the last 10 years. So you would think that it would be there, but no, no mention of Elon, no mention of SpaceX, nothing, none of their accomplishments, not mentioned. I went through the index at the end, no mention of either, not Elon, no SpaceX, nothing. In the entire National Geographic book about space, they literally erased SpaceX from history. Okay. And so I don't really know these people too well. I'm kind of just getting to know them and everything. But I was a little pissed. I was like, wow, this is kind of crazy. Like, how can they even do this? This is Joe Biden take two. National Geographic, an organization I value, and I follow a bunch of platforms and everything. And so I brought it up, and on one-on-one conversations, and I'll give you one of the responses. But this is not representative of everything I've heard in all of the conversations. Oh, really? Well, it's not like I would be. It's not like I'm that pissed that Elon's a bad guy. It's not like I'm pissed that he's not there. So not only they're not excited about space accomplishments, okay, they don't even care that the facts are not represented, that the facts don't appear. They don't care. And this is about a children's book, okay? They don't care that their son is not going to learn the facts, let alone paying $70,000 for a car that's going to sit in their parking driveway. So, I mean, these are like, and this is Massachusetts, and obviously San Francisco or Austin or Philadelphia, New York City, and a bunch of other cities and states around the country, like Seattle, Washington State. Um, they're going to be just as liberal, if not more, in certain cases. So I've come to just this is basically damning evidence that tens of millions of people around the country on the left side are going to um, not buy Teslas. They will do everything in their power to not buy Teslas, even if it's better or cheaper or whatever. Okay. So I think, so first of all, what do you have to say so far?
So I agree with you. I think a lot of hate has been elevated recently. You can see it on X. I mean, there's more posts popping up every other day about Teslas being vandalized and stuff. So I think it's really escalated right now, but it's also because we're just in the backdrop of the election, right? And people's emotions are really raw. I mean, look at what the media is doing, right? The media is calling Elon President Elon, okay, and they're basically
And
saying that
that is
Elon
that's
planted the
yeah,
president.
and that's calculated. Obviously, he's not the president. Obviously, Trump can change the relationship anytime he wants, and it's probably going to evolve. I mean, this thing happened back in 2016, and by June 2017, Elon was off the advisory boards. And I'm guessing something like that is going to happen this time around too. Maybe a little later, maybe to a lesser extent, etc. Because I think the involvement this time around is beyond Elon to the greater kind of PayPal mafia folks in the administration and all that. So it's a stronger influence this time around. But um, but on the other hand, we've seen what also happens on the other side now. The whole thing around President Elon is a calculated move to get Trump feel that maybe he needs to exert his presence a little bit more. Maybe he needs to disagree with Elon on a set couple of things publicly, etc. Now that didn't happen with H1B, right? So again, there's a bit of a stronger influence this time. We'll see how permanent it is. I think only time will tell. Now, but there's space going on about on the Republican side as well now, from the far right side, more the establishment Republican side, I guess you can say. So I think the Republican Party is more divided than I realized. And I think just like on the left side, tens of millions of people are going to refuse buying Teslas at any cost. And if you've missed my story in the first 5 minutes of the space, you can, or first 10 minutes, you can go to YouTube and rewind and watch at 2x speed, whatever. Um, on the right side as well, I mean, we've been saying that the support for Tesla's products on from the right is going to be maybe longer term, maybe, because people hate so emotionally, but the sport is not as emotionally intense. And I think we're seeing already some hate coming from the right side as well. Like I said, established right side. And here's another story. So, man, I guess like a couple of days ago, there was a tweet manufactured that supposedly Elon sent, but he didn't, and he went around replying to people. Did you send this? Did you trying to get the source of it? And I guess the other guy, like the guy, I guess he got to the bottom of it, and then um, the guy ended up, or maybe Elon ended up deleting the guy's account, and I think the guy apologized before his account disappeared somehow. But that doesn't matter because this manufactured tweet went around the world 3 times, despite Elon having shockingly high speed at getting down to the source of it. And if you're following closely, you know, um, knowing that he didn't send it at the end, that took about a day. But during that day, that manufactured lie went around the world 3 times. And it was repeated back to me in one of these one-on-one conversations. And I had followed just a little bit. And to the extent that okay, he didn't say it, and it didn't read like something he would say anyway. To be honest with you, if you're following the guy for 10 plus years, that he wouldn't say it that way, even if he believed those things. Um, so I told the person, I said, "Well, he didn't say it," and it took like back and 3 times of back and forth trying to convince the person that Elon didn't actually say that thing. And then the response after that, instead of like, "Oh, I'm sorry," I'll go back and check my sources and rethink the situation and come back to the conversation. It's not that. The response was, well, he's a bad guy anyway. Doesn't matter. So now you have a situation of, by my estimate, tens of millions of people, if not close to 100 million people in the country, for one reason or another, for political activism, they're not going to buy Tesla's products as long as there's an alternative. And today there are alternatives. Today there are cheaper EVs. There are EVs that go for longer per range. Um, Hybrids are also alternatives as far, and this person actually drives a Toyota hybrid. And so this is a problem because I thought that maybe Elon's involvement in the elections to the extent that he gets Trump elected was necessary, although costly. But I personally didn't foresee that him getting involved beyond November in political, and now he's also getting involved in German politics to a greater extent. And as you know, Europe, hundreds of millions of people as left as California, so you're going to have problems there too. And then when you look at China, yes, they're on the absolute level, they're delivering more and more vehicles, but they're losing market share, and that's because of BYD and a couple other automakers like keeping up with Tesla's price cuts. And in part because they're even more vertically integrated than Tesla. Like BYD manufactures its own battery cells, Tesla does not, and that's going to play a bit of a headwind, even bigger headwind in Tesla Energy in China. And BYD isn't just selling its cars in China; they're also increasingly exporting to other parts of the world. So, so it all depends on FSD at this point. And I guess we all I am a very divergent like I have a very different view on FSD pace of development than the rest of the bull community. But in the last year that I've had this view, things have played out exactly as I predicted. And so at the top of our screens is another longer term prediction that I believe FSD is improving at a predictable rate, and this will continue until algorithmic breakthrough comes along. And I expect these improvements at the following rate. So you can see it at the top of your screens. And I'll put this while ACDC talks, I'll put this on YouTube as well. ACDC, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I'm actually surprised to see the active role Elon is still taking. You know, 2 months in after the election here, and I hope he does take a step back because there's going to be a lot of policies that will come along which will polarize a lot of different people. One of the recent things that I hadn't even thought about is going to be job displacement because of AI. Okay, that is going to take its toll, and it's going to be sooner than later, and we could see the effects of it within a year or two. And if you look at the narrative, that is going to go solely on Elon and the billionaires supporting Trump, right? So I think he can still have a voice, which he definitely will, but I think he has to be more strategic going forward and perhaps take a little bit of a back seat in this role.
Well, he's not going to do that, right? I mean, clearly he's going to get even more involved going forward. We saw this with the H-1B. And I agree with him 100% about the H-1B issue. I think these caps should be removed. And as somebody who went through the process, um, most of the stuff I'm reading about how bad H-1B process is not even true. It doesn't apply to most people. They're talking about kind of edge cases. And it's a great thing for the country. So he's 100% correct as far as I'm concerned. But that doesn't matter from a Tesla investor's perspective. People will reach on to, they just use whatever he says loudly with his megaphone to confirm their own biases and just refuse to buy Tesla products. And yeah, I mean, it's crazy. All right. Um,
You mind if I ask a couple questions
yeah,
for Meta on around the FSD?
yeah, he can come up.
So I've been trying out the 13.2 a lot more, 13.2.2, I guess, a lot more. And, it's just, it's really, really good. I feel more comfortable driving with this version than any other version before, of course. And it performs really well, but there's still, certain regressions. The highway has, in my opinion, especially the merges and some exits have gotten worse. That's kind of hard for me to understand. And I still see mapping as an issue. So in particular, I just wanted to, ask Meta as to why is mapping still an issue? In my opinion, isn't that something that's easier to solve than the training of the models? And isn't that something that we should already have in place since we're kind of like finalizing the training towards unsupervised?
One of the hard parts about training a model is you can't tell transformer models what to pay attention to. You can only reward them based on what they paid attention to. So even if the map data is correct and it goes into the model could still accidentally ignore that map data. That's problem number one. Problem number two, I think you really trivialize how hard it can be to collect map data. Apple's not a small company. Apple really tried to make Apple Maps work and they really struggled. Even Google Maps has errors today. So even the best performing highest volume map data has issues. So it's actually quite complicated to get the map data everywhere in America. So you're always going to be able to find places where it doesn't work. This is why when they go city by city, state by state in a rollout, it's very achievable to do it at that level and at that scale. So my biggest takeaway would be when evaluating how FSD is performing, find the best performing operational domains and focus on that. Because if it can start performing in meaningfully large domains, all the other vehicles can just be sold to operate there.
All right, thanks. One specific scenario that I have a question around. So in my neighborhood, right? So my neighborhood's kind of like a U-shaped neighborhood. There's two entrances to it, and it always chooses to take the longer route. Okay, and it can see the turn, which is a shorter route, but it just never takes it. If I actually put my blinker on, then it'll take it, but it chooses to take the longer route always. Now, you said that, they kind of operate on this reward system. So in my opinion, the reward system should be to take the shortest route for FSD, right? So why would it choose to take a longer route instead?
That's not how it works. They don't train on every single instance, every single place. They sample situations, they look at interventions that are happening that are common. I don't know what state you're in. That state may not be a priority. It's not about you, it's just about their priorities. I don't know what kind of intervention you're having. That particular kind of intervention might not be affecting a lot of Tesla customers that are unique, irrespective of how frequent the issue is for you. The number of people that are affected by it is a different story. And they might be trying to optimize for critical situations. And that doesn't sound like it's a dangerous situation. It's a frustrating situation.
Yeah,
So those are all the reasons why it's just not a priority. I wouldn't take them not solving it as it's hard to solve. It's just not a
right,
priority.
right. The tweet at the top where I listed hardware 3, hardware 4, 5 through 8, and what I expect in terms of nines. George Hotz just responded about an hour ago and says, "Where's data from?" He says, "This 5 to 10 year timeline matches what I believe also." That's really interesting. So that's in a reply to the top to the tweet at the top of your screens.
Is that for all of the US or is that for the
Yeah,
best performing?
nationwide. Nationwide adoption of robotaxis, which is when it becomes material for Tesla stock.
Why isn't it
But,
material if it's popular in, say, California and Texas?
well, um, like if it's statewide, then maybe. But if you kind of do the numbers, how many robotaxis are they going to need in San Francisco and Austin? Maybe thousands, maybe.
Maybe 100,000 tops.
It's not going to be 100,000. I think the adoption is going to take an S curve. Like even if this is turned on tomorrow, they're not going to start with 50 cents per mile. There's going to be hiccups around the infrastructure, owners adding their cars. This is going to take a long time. The um, growth of the network is going to take a long time, in my opinion. So let's say they're going to start, let's say in Austin or San Francisco, like around Omar's block, and they're going to generate a few bucks of profit. Let's say that's not going to show. It's not going to move the needle, the bottom line. And even if it's statewide, like I think getting a statewide permit from the California government is going to be more difficult than people realize, maybe because of politics. But I mean, look at Waymo, how it's been able, how it kind of went around about its growth. And I used to think, as previous conversations, I used to think that as a was going to go towards a kind of push a software and turn on the fleet nationwide kind of thing. But I don't think the data is supporting that approach. So, so yeah. And then the thing is, like, let's say, for example, they did FSD unsupervised or road taxis in a city. Analysts or investors, let's say in general, market participants will not be able to kind of project out that any sort of margin generated in Austin is also going to apply nationwide or worldwide, because we don't really know how competition is going to shape up. So that's the argument that AI driver did in this space, and I just think it's wrong. Meta.
First off, I know I've been pretty consistent about saying it always be city by city or state by state, however you want to look at it, region by region. I agree that the data is now showing that, and that's likely the way it's going to go. However, when we look at like purchasing decisions, if you buy a vehicle in Michigan and you know that you could sell it to someone in San Francisco who would be able to use it as a personal vehicle, not a robotaxi, but have all the kind of perks and features that people are getting when that's good enough to be a robotaxi in California, doesn't that cause the used car values to go up? And wouldn't that attract more buyers, as we saw people not want to buy when Tesla cut prices aggressively?
Yeah. So you're saying if Tesla introduces a robotaxi service in Austin, wouldn't that increase the resale values of Teslas elsewhere in the country? Is that the argument?
Yes.
Um, I think there would be some of that. I guess the level of that happening is a little debatable, don't you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's just,
And you're assuming that the Austin, San Francisco, or LA robotaxi network will start with customer cars, which is also a big assumption, I think.
that's fair. I'm coming from a perspective of the ADAS would have to be really good by the time the robotaxis are working in the same area.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there isn't going to be much time differential between FSD unsupervised everywhere and robotaxis. Like you need FSD unsupervised for robotaxi service.
Yeah, but you could have FSD everywhere, but not have robotaxis for a while.
You mean FSD unsupervised everywhere and not robotaxis?
Correct. You could have it in customer vehicles that are 3 and Y,
Yeah, I mean, but for a while. What do you mean for a while?
6 months, a year.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't think that's an immaterial. I don't think that's a material amount of time. Um, s- so what do you think about George Haas's reply to the tweet at the top, where he says, "I agree with this 5 to 10 year timeline"?
I've stated my opinions about him in the past. I'll just say it's bizarre to ask what's the source of the data and then agree in the same sentence.
Well, I think maybe he reached his conclusion. I don't think he's saying he agreed with the data, what the data is showing. I think maybe he reached the conclusion using different data, and he's using different logic. So that's why maybe he's looking at this data and saying, and my data, and like, how did you reach this? Did you reach it from a different point of perspective?
I guess what I'm saying is I fundamentally disagree with this notion because when I read your tweet, the way I see it is this is where things are going to top out. Like hardware 3 will never get better than 90%. Hardware 4 will never get better than 2 nines, etc. Um, I don't know that you can make that claim when you don't even know what the future hardware is going to be, and scaling laws continue to hold. So I think there's a dimension of time that's missing in that tweet. So I don't know how to interpret it.
Okay. ACDC?
So just going by the assumption of the limited areas, and even if we were to have 100,000 robotaxis, if you do the math on that, the 100,000 robotaxis running 365 days, 200 miles per day, still only adds about $3.6 billion to the bottom line. So that's my reasoning. I think this is going to, yes, it'll increase incrementally, but it's going to take some time, and that's my reason for the valuation getting ahead of itself.
Yeah, and I would say all of those assumptions are optimistic. 100,000 robotaxis, 365. Like I guarantee there's not going to be a single robotaxi that goes around 365 days out of the year. And they're not going to go 24/7 either. So
Right. I'm being very, very optimistic in this scenario, and I still can't get there.
Yeah, exactly. And Waymo's advances are, I think, surprising to me at least. I mean, I didn't expect. I mean, in this space, I think people did say Waymo is not the same as Cruise when I was kind of bulking them in the same bucket, and I think Meta was one of them, and West was the other. And but man, they've gone. The one has gone downhill, crashed, and then the other one is growing their fleet. And Google investing $5 billion into Waymo earlier this year is a huge vote of confidence. Meta,
Yeah, I think the significant difference, and this is the reason why I always said Waymo was the biggest competitor to Tesla now, is I was saying like the race to watch, in my opinion, is how good Waymo is doing, because that lights the fire under Tesla, right? Competition is good. I think if Waymo was not successful, it could have taken Tesla even longer, bluntly, right? Like they a lot of what Tesla has done successfully has been doing what Waymo did in the NGale paper in 2020. It took them 3 years to finally get around to doing it, and maybe arguably 4 with V12 in some ways. It's like a different way of doing it, but um, it it seems to be the only approach that works. Waymo's advantage, though, and this is important, I think, for Tesla investors to think about, is Google and Waymo have a big advantage on how long they've been iterating on making chips. So as vertically integrated as Tesla is up until the making of the chips, Waymo's in this weird boat where they're very, very vertically integrated on the software and the chips, but not on the hardware of the car, which is obviously
but
complicated.
that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter because that would only matter if you needed to build tens of millions of road taxis.
Agreed.
Because
Strongly
other
agreed.
automakers already have the capable to build millions of them. And to the extent that I used to think that maybe Tesla's software capabilities and mass manufacturing capabilities are superior, look at BYD. BYD is ramping vehicles at a much faster rate than Tesla. And I thought that maybe Cybertruck would ramp much faster than previous products, but it actually ramped up slowest than previous products and at a higher cost. And so,
That's fair.
yeah, so then where is the manufacturing capability? And that obviously applies to Optimus too in the future. So, combined with the fact that Waymo is vertically integrated into chip design through Google, and also AI research through Google DeepMind, um, now you have a problem in your hands. And as Tesla, so
I agree. I think we're finally in agreement on this for what it's worth.
yeah, yeah.
I will say there's also another asterisk. I think it's really worth repeating when you do talk to folks because I want people to understand I'm not bearish. I'm just trying to be practical and like be honest about the facts. Waymo doesn't have to go electric. They could easily just go to gas cars, and there's tons of manufacturers who know how to make gas cars. Uh, Going robo-taxi with gas cars throughout the country has a huge upside on saving lives, and no one should shun that. You'll probably save more lives with a gas or hybrid robo-taxi service throughout the country quickly than if you forestall that because you want it to be fully electric. And you can switch it to fully electric in your own time.
I mean, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that because I think the advantages of EV robotaxis are just going to be insurmountable from a gasoline perspective. But
But if it's gasoline for the first 3-4 years, does it really matter? Because you're getting network effects of getting everybody over first.
yeah, I mean, you're right on that. I mean, at that point, why not do hybrids? Like,
Yeah,
it's
they probably do
there's
hybrids. My
by the
point
way,
is more whatever
there's
cars we can get for cheap, right? Like probably there's a bunch of car companies that have a bunch of cars sitting somewhere in parking lots that could turn them into Waymos.
I mean, there's tremendous benefit. I mean, you can do hybrids, and there's also an ample production capacity for EVs around the world too. You know,
Yeah, but they seem to struggle. Like they struggle on a cost basis, right? Like for the people who make the argument that a Waymo costs 150K, my question is how much would that Waymo cost if it wasn't a EV?
hmm yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. It would be
Or if it wasn't the Jaguar F-Type that's overpriced.
right.
Yeah, which
Right.
they apparently ordered 50,000 and they got 1,000, right? That says a lot more about Jaguar than Waymo. It sounds like pre-COVID, Waymo had a lot of confidence. They put an order in, then COVID happens. I think we have to assume that their progress would have been very different if COVID did not happen.
Right. Yeah, it's really impressive, man, what Google has accomplished. Um, Also, like watching Gemini supersede ChatGPT, kind of like what seemingly, on the surface at least, like overnight, is pretty amazing.
Those things are never overnight, though,
Of
right?
course, but on the surface, right, to the user, it appears overnight until they're released. And man, that is crazy. And when what is and as far as I know, they trained Gemini on their own TPUs. So where's the supposed advantage of NVIDIA GPUs and CUDA? Gone.
I've been saying that. I was here a year ago saying that's not going to last very long, about a year, right?
Yeah. And exactly. And so I increased my NVIDIA short. I think the overall markets are overpriced by about 2x. I think semiconductors are the most overpriced industry, and NVIDIA is the most overpriced semiconductor stock. So, I mean, I
I
guess we'll
think
see how it
crypto is the
plays out.
most overpriced industry, but I agree with you by proxy.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Like MicroStrategy, man, I mean, I still have a bit of a short, but I closed half of my shorts, a little more than half of my shorts, um, about 10% ago on MicroStrategy, and made 40% on it. And I'm glad I held on to the rest of it. But yeah, it's crazy. Now, on the other hand, it's not like the company is worthless. You know, they still hold an asset, whether you agree with the asset or the value of it. The value of the asset is immediately, um, it's a level one asset, meaning you can look up the value of it right away. You don't have to do some sort of DCF analysis or comparable company analysis to get to the value of it with a bunch of estimates. There's a market for it. It's a very liquid market. And the value of MicroStrategy is not zero. And I would argue it's more about 1 times book value. So I think to the extent that people are getting greedy about their shorts on MicroStrategy, I think that's also a mistake. Meta than ACDC.
We can have this in another space because I realize it's a Tesla space, but someday it would be an interesting breakdown, I think, with you because you have a more pragmatic view than any, to go through like what Tether is, how CZ, and how the actual pricing of Bitcoin comes to the market, how it's not as trustworthy, in my opinion, the mark to market effect. And then I would love to hear your take after discussing that. I also agree with, this is not financial advice. I'm not saying be greedy about your short. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying I don't believe even that value is real.
Yeah. ACDC.
I'd love to hear Meta's point of view on what you mentioned earlier today on DeepSeek
Yes,
copying FSD.
exactly. Let me just read this summary real quick. DeepSeek, a Chinese AI startup, has developed the DeepSeek V3 mixture of experts language model, boasting 671 billion parameters. Remarkably, the model was trained using NVIDIA H800 GPUs over 2 months. So this is the international version of NVIDIA H100, 200s or Hopper platform because of the sanctions. So these are less capable GPUs, totaling approximately 2.8 million GPU hours. This achievement signifies an 11-fold reduction in computational resources compared to models like Meta's Llama 3, which required 30.8 million GPU hours with 16,384 H100 GPUs over 54 days. So about the same number of days, but the capability of GPU is much lower, an 11 times fold reduction of computational resources. DeepSeek's efficiency stands on several key optimizations. One, dual pipe algorithm. I'm not going to go into details of these things unless Meta wants to. Two, communication optimization, and three, low precision training. Performance benchmarks indicate that DeepSeek V3 matches or surpasses models such as GPT-4x, Claude 3.5 Sonnet, and Llama 3.1, depending on the specific test. The model and its weights have been open sourced, inviting further evaluation from the AI community. This development underscores the potential for advanced AI models to be trained with significantly fewer resources through strategic optimizations, channeling challenging the notion that cutting-edge AI development is solely dependent on vast computational power. It also highlights the ingenuity of Chinese AI researchers in mitigating the impact of hardware availability constraints due to international sanctions. Meta.
So first thing I want to say, all the people that are doing the regulations on the hardware sanctions don't understand how the hardware actually works.
Right.
Most of these sanctions don't read into that they're actual sanctions. I just want to be very, very clear. The
Right.
hardware is not that incapable.
Right.
Number one.
Okay.
So like we're talking like maybe 1 or 2% difference. It's not like they achieved this with something that was 50% less,
Oh, is that right?
Correct. And then second thing, hardware tends to scale pretty well when you connect them to each other, right? So if something was 50% less efficient, all you've done is change the cost equation. And when we're talking about AI models, cost is never in the papers, right? So like there's some back of the envelope evaluations people have done with some numbers that have come out with OpenAI. The expectation per the back of the envelope calculations people have done is if you bought the Azure chips at retail prices for rent from Microsoft, the O3 example they showed was $300,000 per prompt. That is insane, right? That is so when you read these papers and you read these accomplishments, you have to keep cost in mind. All they're doing is they're doubling the cost or so for the people in China. It sucks, but their electricity is lower. Electricity can be a larger part of the cost over a longer period of time. You know, on the surface, the accomplishments can still be the same. It's just a cost function at that point. So if you ignore cost,
Okay.
this paper is impressive for a few other reasons. One of them is it does highlight something that people keep thinking, and this is like how like Andre Karpathy would say there's software 1.0 and then there's software 2.0. You could argue there's a software 3.0 coming, which is we spent a lot of time figuring out the capabilities and the capacities of the hardware by saying, fuck cost, don't worry about it, just grow as big as you can, demonstrate what's possible so that we will make the investment into the hardware. Now that the investments are being made into the hardware, those costs will collapse. And so 2025 and onwards, we're going to see the same thing we saw before. And this is what I was always saying, that 10x reduction, we're seeing it, right? You see these large models, then they run on small chips. Then you see these large models, they run on small chips. It's not because the chips are getting better, but it's because when you do fabrication, you have to do really high volume. And so you have to demonstrate there is going to be a market for it. And you can demonstrate it with really expensive large models. And once you've demonstrated the model, the market exists, now you can go ahead and fabricate the other chips. And that's what's starting to happen now. It also takes 2 to 4 years to spool up the fabrication lines, so that's why there's a delay.
Okay. Now I'm just kind of reading a summary of the Tom's hardware paper or the article. Dual pop algorithm, communication optimization, low precision training. Now,
Let's try bottom up because
okay,
it's easier bottom up.
Yeah.
All low precision training, and this has been demonstrated a lot as well, is we used to do really high precision training, right? So that means that a lot of significant bits after, so it'd be like 10 digits, after the decimal point, or however you want to look at it, and 10 digits, including the digits before the decimal point. What we have found is it's better to actually have lots of more parameters. So you could take your 10 digits and split it into 5 and 5, and now you have 2 parameters instead of 1 parameter. So when we look at models and we talk about parameter count, not all parameters are the same size. Some are like 64-bit, some are 32-bit, some are 16-bit. Now we're starting to see models being trained pretty well with 8-bit. So the same hardware can be doubled as a result. I'm really hand waving on that one, but effectively.
Okay. So now is this something that Tesla AI team has been using for FSD development? Or if not, is this something they can use in the future?
They've been doing this since at least 2019 or so, in that they've been aware of it at least. They wrote a paper on C-Float 8 and C-Float 16. And the entire concept of C-Float, James Dorman did a great breakdown of it. It's basically going over how Tesla said we can actually use less significant bits because for our particular domain, it doesn't matter, right? Like how precise the angle is at which the steering wheel is. It turns out you really don't need that much precision. Same thing for how hard the brake is being pressed. You really don't need that much precision for a lot of the things that they're working with, including like how many bits it takes to represent a pixel on a screen. It doesn't take that many. You don't need to be that nuanced on how red the color actually is. So that demonstration at that time was considered domain specific, and it's become increasingly clear that it's applicable to the whole industry. I would argue this optimization has already landed in hardware 3. I know that goes against my arguments with machine, but I think this particular optimization has already landed.
Okay. I mean, I guess that's one of my kind of main arguments. Like sometimes people tell me that Tesla won't need all that, tens of millions of dollars of GPUs to get FST to 99.9999% reliability, or one accident, in a million miles. And the argument on the other side is usually, there's other ways of improving the model reliability or the performance. And I agree, but it's not like these things aren't already available to the Tesla team. And I'm not aware of any optimization that has been available to the Tesla AI team and they haven't been using it and they're going to use it tomorrow.
There are a few. There are still quite a few things, but there's trade-offs to going down that path, right? Like maintenance nightmare or something like that. So there's definitely not they're definitely not like leaving things on the table, you could argue, but on the flip side, you could say they knew about the MGill papers for 3 years before they decided to go with transformers.
Exactly. That's my argument. So it was a conscious decision. So it's not like, they stumbled upon this thing or somebody invented an
Exactly.
algorithmic breakthrough like transformers. And do you foresee an algorithmic breakthrough like transformers in the near future?
Yes.
What is it?
I think there are many different papers in this space. We talked about this a long time ago, but I still believe in G-flow nets as a really big, likely thing that will break through. We're seeing it more and more with models where chain of thought is becoming more and more popularized. I can try and describe it with an analogy if you want to go that route, but I don't know which way you want to go with this space.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, but before we dig into it a little bit more, Google not only is vertically integrated, I guess Google slash Waymo, not only vertically integrated into design of the chips, TPUs, but also AI research. And, I think Chinese developers who developed DeepSeek appears to be very capable with AI research as well, and kind of implement cutting edge research to get around these restrictions and, really stun the world. So on the Tesla AI team, however, I haven't seen evidence of great research that kind of like leads to breakthroughs that are not replicated by competitors like Waymo.
I don't agree with that for what it's worth.
Okay.
There have been pretty big ones. I think the big difference, just as a reference, is, and this is most like an Elon influence, Tesla doesn't publish as many papers. So you don't see it from the paper perspective, but you do see a AI day and things like that. And there have been big breakthroughs that they have discussed. But I would also agree that they do lean more towards implementation than invention.
Exactly. They lean more on implementation than invention. So doesn't that kind of like, isn't the Tesla team kind of saying that we can implement on others' inventions, and that assumes that other companies will continue to share their inventions as they have in the past? So Google, for example, the attention is all you need paper was years before transformers were invented, and we kind of learned how transformative transformers work. So had they known that, would they been as open with the attention is all you need paper, for example?
That's a false narrative spun by the media, just to be clear. The GPT paper came out, the Transformer paper came out in 2017. The first implementation of GPT-1 came out in 2018, and Andre Karpathy was at OpenAI when that was occurring. So, like, sorry, Elon was at OpenAI when that was occurring. people knew about the transformer paper and how impactful it was in the AI industry. It just wasn't in the press.
So you're saying Google knew how important transformers were going to be and still chose to share it openly.
Yes.
Okay. So then does that,
At least they had to have known. Right? Like it's not, it was not unobvious.
well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think there's many examples in history of inventors not really realizing how their inventions are going to be applied in years to come.
Okay, well, here's another argument. The MOE, Mixture of Experts paper, was written in 2018, and it leans on how transformers work. And the media didn't catch up to that being a transformative paper until Gemini 2 came out. So
Right.
those papers have already been out there. They've already been talking about it, and they talked about it when the 1.5 came out as well. So I think there's a big difference in this industry. It's like what Elon has said. It's very, very hard to find the talent. So you almost have to like a peacock, show off what you have so that the other talent will come to you. It's not about can others do it. It's there's only so many people that have the mental math skills. And if you can attract them all to join your team, then that's better.
Right. Okay. If you had to rank, and I know you can limit your bias to a greater degree than most people, but I know you also have bias one way or another. Um, but let's say Google DeepMind, Meta's internal research team, I don't know what they're called, Tesla AI, and Chinese researchers. How would you rank them?
No OpenAI, no Anthropic.
Sure, we can rank them too.
I, I I think I have to pass on this, Iman. I'm happy to have this conversation with you privately. I don't want to have it here, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Um, okay. Are you still mostly invested in Tesla, or have you taken some chips off the table?
I have slowly started to take chips off the table.
Okay.
I am taking them off at a price of 700. I'm doing it through a different process. It's something called a decumulator, but that is the price that I'm exiting at.
Okay. So you're writing calls basically at 700.
Effectively, yeah.
Right.
I basically have an agreement with someone who's buying the shares from me at 700.
Sure. Okay. Um, hmm, interesting. Any other questions, ACDC for Meta?
So, with all, excuse me, with all that in mind, can China use this to solve FSD? Because that's what you were referring to. And I thought FSD is a little bit more of a closed source where, it's just not that easy to replicate.
No, I've been in these spaces, I think, since the beginning of time. I've been coming to the human spaces saying, you know, the data advantage only goes so far. And I mean, we got
Right.
into it a lot on Waymo in the past. And I was like, you don't need that. Like, that's when I started bringing up the chinchilla paper, and I was trying to demonstrate like you need 10x data to get a 2x improvement. So how often are you going to keep 10xing, right? So if you had 1% of the data that Tesla has, but you had the equivalent of 100x compute to what Tesla had at the time they started making FSD, you could catch up in theory. And when we say 1% of the data, you also have to remember of all the miles that are driven, 99.999% of it is uninteresting. So it's if you can get the interesting edge cases more effectively, like maybe, I don't know, hiring drivers and telling them where to go, that's a really big deal. So again, this comes back to one of the reasons, in my opinion, Tesla didn't start a city by city rollout. And if I was Elon, the thing I would try to pressure is this state by state reporting requirement. If that didn't exist, it would make all the sense in the world for Tesla to start doing unsupervised in different cities. But the way it's implemented today, many states have adopted California's rule, which says as soon as you start operating in one city, that same model vehicle operating anywhere else in the state must report all interventions. That's probably their big problem.
Hmm.
I believe Texas doesn't have that requirement, which is probably why they'll probably start there.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
yeah, like let's say your competitor and Tesla comes out and says every single intersection where a bunch of interventions happen, then you're Waymo and you just say, okay, cool, get our drivers to go drive there. We don't need to have to. I don't want to drive all the other miles. They're actually noisy data. I just want the edges.
So let's go back to your decision of taking some chips off the table in Tesla stock. What percent of that decision is due to macroeconomic? What percent is due to microeconomic considerations?
I would say 100% of that is due to personal decisions, like purchasing a home. But 20 to 30% of that might be macroeconomic. I think we've had conversations in this space that do convince me the market's running hot. Recently, I've started, and this is not financial advice. I want to be very, very clear. Don't ever anybody make a decision based on what I say and then be upset. I am starting to use Bitcoin as an inverse proxy for waste or bad math happening in the market, I guess. Like the higher Bitcoin goes, the more I think people are not doing the math. Therefore, I should get out. When Bitcoin goes down, I'll look into buying more stocks because the markets are going to be more reasonable. I'm also in a different place
Yeah.
in life right now where I don't need to aggressively invest. So I'm, not
Yeah.
financial advice.
I mean, the thing is, like, Bitcoin is not the only indication of what you said, right? There's also other pump and dump stocks going around again, from GameStop to EOS to MicroStrategy, that just make no sense.
Yeah, the way I think of it is like there's some, and this could be completely wrong. There's some group of people who have, let's say, half their money in crypto and half their money in the stock market. And when their crypto goes up, they feel really, really rich. So they get very loose with how they're quote unquote investing. And I don't agree with that. So it's time to exit.
Yeah. We have a new speaker here. Flying car, go ahead.
Yes, I have a question for Meta. Actually, now since he was just speaking, I have two questions, if that's allowed. But my first question is, when Tesla rolls out their first city, do you think it's going to be a setup similar to what Waymo has? And if you've already addressed this today, I apologize.
Define similar?
Well, what I mean by that is, everybody argues about who's ahead in the race for full self-driving. And right now, Waymo has a geofenced area, and they can't leave. And I mean, do you think that Tesla's going to set up something similar to that?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh yeah, definitely. We definitely are. Just as a
When you say we, who are you speaking for?
And he was talking out of turn, so just continue, please.
Okay. So my question is to Meta. So you think that Tesla can achieve that in 2025, basically doing what Waymo's doing today within the next 12 months?
I didn't give a timeline when I said it that they would go city by city, to be clear.
Sure. No, but I'm asking, do you think that Tesla can do that in 2025?
I thought they could do it a year ago, so I've been wrong.
Okay. So I guess that leads to my next question, which is, to me, it doesn't seem like Waymo would be able to produce a $40,000 robo-taxi anytime in the next, I don't know, 3 years. So why is there such a debate on who's ahead?
I think that's a misnomer. Ahead here, if you're talking about like margins per car, again, it goes back to the original argument of why does Waymo have to make EVs? They could just go to a gas car. They could easily buy used old gas cars that didn't sell, stick the sensors on them, and go from there. They've also shown a Gen 5 to Gen 6 design that has a 40% sensor suite reduction. And I used to talk about this way back when. I know you and I had disagreements on this, and it was like, well, they've never deleted any LiDAR. Well, guess what? Now they're deleting LiDAR. They're not deleting all of LiDAR, but they are deleting many LiDARs, right? And Waymo talked about this publicly. They put 21 cameras on there to figure out which of the camera angles was what was needed. then they can delete the rest.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for answering that question. And my second question is, I'm just curious about, how long have you been heavily, I mean, are you heavily invested into, were you heavily invested in Tesla, or you just took a small amount of money and leveraged it? Or have you been a big, investor in Tesla for a long time and now you're starting to pull back?
I'm gonna avoid too many conversations about my financial stuff because I don't think it's as
Yeah.
relevant to like AI discussions. But I have been involved meaningfully for a very long time with Tesla's stuff.
Okay. I'm not trying to pry into your personal
Thank you.
business.
All right. So I think I'm kind of missing. Look, I think this point is not getting much attention. I think Trump is getting into an economy that's vastly different than 2016. He's coming in with a similar playbook that he did in 2016. So I don't think. I think the team is going to find out very early on that they may not be able to accomplish some of the things that they're saying. But on the other hand, like Bitcoin, people are showing me waves of Bitcoin going up and down and up and down and up and down. But the fact is, there hasn't been a recession like Great Recession so far as Bitcoin has been around. So um, I agree with your view that I think it's a bit of an indicator of risk taking in the markets. And if there's a recession like Great Recession, which I think is possible, then I think we're going to see for the first time how Bitcoin handles that.
Didn't we have a recession while Bitcoin was around before?
You're talking about the COVID recession?
Yep.
But that's not, I don't think that's a representative of I think the recession that's coming is not going to be similar to COVID. I think it's going to be more similar to Great Financial Recession. Great Recession. Does that make sense? Go
Yeah,
ahead.
that makes sense. You're saying it's gonna be like a deeper, sustained recession.
Right. I think the Fed was in a position to take drastic action very quickly, and I don't think that reaction is going to be there this time around. Or at least it's not going to be as quick. And because we've just went through years of elevated inflation levels, and in the last press conference, he made it very clear that they want to get to 2%. And he made it very clear that some FOMC participants are worried about sticky inflation, and that there's uncertainty around how inflation is going to trend in years to come. So I don't think they're going to be as quick to react this time as they were in COVID, because COVID was happened coming off of a decade basically of underinflation. And unemployment rate was surging really fast, really high to like record levels. So they had the kind of capacity to take drastic action and the willingness. I think they have the capacity, but I don't think the willingness is going to be there this time. Does that make sense?
Do you think it's political or because of the way their
No,
balance
I don't.
sheets look?
No, I don't think it's political or balance sheet. I think it's just because of they want to make sure that they get this inflation out of the system, the sticky inflation out of the system. ACDC.
Yeah, I agree. So this recession is going to be about and because of also cutting liquidity out of the market. And during the COVID time, we actually saw the opposite. People actually had extra savings, extra stimulus to invest in stuff like Bitcoin. And this is not going to be anything similar to that.
All right. I mean, we'll see. Like these things are hard to predict, obviously. I feel confident that there will be a recession soon, and it's going to depend on um, reactions with monitor and fiscal. We don't know how that's going to pan out. I see Machine in here. He kind of missed, I think, your admission that he was right.
I didn't admit that he was right. I just said there was an argument that would help my situation, and that particular argument doesn't apply.
All right. Well, if he wants to
The
come
day
up,
I admit Machine is right, I will eat really hard candy, like the kind that, grandmothers give to kids and think that it's good candy. The kind of stuff that Machine likes eating.
yeah.
It tastes like Popeyes, I believe.
Let me ask you one more question. While Machine works up the courage to come up to speaker board, have you changed
I
your?
want to, by the way, I want Machine to come up and see if he agrees or disagrees with Grant claiming scaling laws are broken.
Yeah. Has your views on NVIDIA changed at all? And how does what we heard from or saw from DeepSeek shape your views on NVIDIA further?
My views have not changed. I still think I could be wrong for quite a while. I'm terrible at timing of things. So, like, there's that. But I do think long term, NVIDIA does not have a significant advantage now.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
And by the way, long term here could be like 4 years away.
Right. Now, Google doesn't sell its TPUs to third-party customers, but they do make it available for use through Google Cloud. And that also is competition, maybe indirectly, for NVIDIA, right? Because if I'm a user of cloud services, um, instead of going to Azure, I can go to Google Cloud because it's cheaper and is even more capable in terms of hardware. What do you think?
I don't know if they're more capable. They are different, right? So there are more papers being written, and it helps Google that DeepMind's papers are written in JAX. More and more people are starting to adopt JAX. That runs well on TPU. It helps them when you have people out there like Chris Latner building tooling that makes it where the hardware you run on is agnostic. What hurts them is people that are really already built. They've built a bunch into CUDA, like Tesla. It's harder for them to migrate because they're kind of locked in. But for newer companies, there's not a lock-in yet, and that industry is still growing. I would say you can also look to Amazon building Infurion. They're further behind. Their TPUs are at 6th generation. Amazon's getting to 1st generation now. There's a long way to go. But as Amazon comes in, as Microsoft comes in, NVIDIA gets into this weird place where they're going to have to build their own data centers and build their own cloud service because they're very dependent on cloud service providers continuing to host NVIDIA chips. If all the cloud service providers have their own chips and the margin difference at which they buy NVIDIA chips and they have their own chips hosted is significant enough that they choose to just serve their own chips for cheap enough that customers switch over, then their chips will get even cheaper because they can buy even more volume. And that starts a cycle that's bad for NVIDIA.
Well, I think that cycle has already started, don't you think?
Yeah, I think the writing's on the wall. It's like Intel. Like people thought between Intel and the cloud providers, Intel held the power. Well, it turns out there was other people who can make x86 chips. And the only person I think in the room that has the power, that the only company that has infallibly all the power in the world is TSMC.
Exactly.
And that's why America and China should never ever go to war. Like Taiwan is what makes this world go round.
Right. Um, are you short NVIDIA?
No, I actually wait. Hold on, I might be. I think I sold a call spread. It's not significant. I just did a couple of things just for fun.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you credit where credit's due. I didn't do this because you said it. I did it on my own. But after our conversation about MSTR and NVIDIA, that is when I entered similar positions.
Oh, you made money on MicroStrategy?
Shorting, yeah.
Oh,
I didn't
nice.
short directly, but I did call spreads, yeah.
Okay. Did you hear what I said about one times book?
Yeah, I just don't believe in Bitcoin. Like,
Oh,
to be
yeah.
honest, I'm like super like sore thumb about crypto. I've been on about it for a while. I just don't believe in crypto at all. And I can break it down, but not right now necessarily.
I mean, I don't think it's going away. I think
I
Bitcoin is
think
going
it
to stay
is.
here.
I think it's going away in like 20 years.
I mean, like, even today, there are investors invest in gold. Why do you
Yeah.
think people will, like, some people will never sell their Bitcoin? Like, some people will never
Here's my
sell their
counter
gold.
argument to that. Gold, if you look it up, it's used for technology, it's used by weddings, it's used for jewelry. There's still like large percentage of use for gold for the above ground gold, right? Granted, I agree. There's a bunch of people that are buying it, whatever. There's people that stockpile freaking aluminum. Like Pepsi and Coca-Cola have stockpiles of aluminum that they aren't using that Tesla would love to use, but they're just in warehouses. So people hoard commodities that are actually being used. The problem with Bitcoin is if you own all of Bitcoin, it's worth nothing. If Bitcoin doesn't trade hands, it's worth nothing. So Bitcoin's very much dependent on that. And I think the big conflict, and this is my personal opinion on this, but the big conflict is as AI becomes more powerful, the value of spending electrons on AI, the value of spending the chip fab on AI will outpace any value made from artificial hopium on crypto.
Interesting.
Maybe that's more of a hope. I'll be honest, that's less research than all other AI discussions we have.
Yeah. All right. What else do we need to talk about?
How do you feel about 2024? The progress that has been made?
From by whom? What do you mean?
In AI in general, like if you put yourself here last year versus where we are now.
I mean, last year I thought we were gonna have robotaxis by now. In 2023, I thought we were gonna have robotaxis by now.
Yeah, I think I was on a similar page. So in some ways it's very disappointing. In other ways it's been very exciting. The software I think has kept up and the hardware has disappointed.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the primary difference between what I thought last year, or the year before, versus what I think today is more around. I used to think that if you have twice as many cars running FSD, driving twice as many miles on FSD because FSD is better, and you have twice as many training compute and twice as more powerful inference computer, that you would be 2 to the 4 times better performance in AI model.
Oh, it doesn't scale at
But
all. It's the
but
inverse.
it's scaling more like 2x, and everything has to improve by 2x to get to that
No,
first
everything has to
improvement.
improve by 10x for you to get one dimension of 2x, at least, maybe 20x.
Yeah. So based on that new understanding, I posted at the top my forecast for how the reliability of FSD will progress in the next decade. And in a reply to the tweet at the top, your favorite person, George Hotz, says this is in line with my 5 to 10 year timeline. And
Hey,
but of
all I have
course,
to say is
he's a competitor to Tesla, so we'll see. I mean,
all I have to say
everybody
is
can run.
Twitter search has never been the same since he joined Twitter and changed it completely.
I don't know. I mean, I have mixed feelings about him. Like he's been wrong on some things, he's been right on some things. Like he used to be very um, kind of like we're gonna beat Tesla, and obviously that didn't happen. But then he called Mobileye's demise, even though in the near term, after he called it, Intel ended up buying Mobileye, and Mobileye stock went up. In the longer term, I think he's proven correct on that front. And I mean, the guy's obviously a genius, but he has his hands in a lot of things, and some things are correct, some things are wrong. Nobody's perfect, so I don't know. I'm not really.
Other than rooting iPhone, I'm not sure he's succeeded on a lot yet, in my opinion.
I mean, what he's accomplished with this company, Comma AI, is very impressive.
Okay,
You
I
know,
guess I don't really. I don't know how many people actually use comma. It's fine. It works. You're right.
and then he also called ahead of time that Tesla was going to have to do end-to-end neural networks, right?
I mean, a lot of people call that, but sure, yeah. Here's the thing. I was in a space with him recently. I did have a conversation with him. I don't know if you're aware of this. I was very polite. I did not, I did not say anything that I'm saying now. I was very, very polite. But I asked him a couple of questions, and one of the questions I asked him was like, "When is Comma AI going to solve City Street?" His answer was not, "It's hard. We're going to get there. We're going to try. Whatever." His argument was, "I don't think customers actually want self-driving cars in cities."
Mm.
That's one. And then the second one is that he keeps saying like, okay, the way I asked him like, how are you getting the error? How are you correcting error in your models, because you don't have a lot of observable data and you don't own the vehicles, etc., and how you get control for all the different dynamics for the cars. His answer was, we look at the line that the user went down, and then we have a algorithm for how off that line you are. And then I asked him, okay, well, when you make a left turn, you can make it wide or you can make it narrow. There's a lot of right answers. How do you deal with that noise in the data? And that's what led to the conversation about, well, you don't have it on highway. And that nature of reasoning, I don't think leads to successful outcomes.
Yeah, I think he's incredibly smart and genius, but I don't think he has this kind of like, or I don't know him obviously very well, but to me it seems like he's kind of where his weakness is more around having a cohesive strategy that he persistently executes on.
I agree with a lack of execution. Yes.
ACDC.
Not to change the topic, Yaman, but do you have any predictions on delivery numbers, or do you think that it's not going to have any
I don't
material
think it
effect to it?
matters. I don't think it matters. Like whether it's 500,000, 510,000, even 520,000 or 409,000, it doesn't matter. The challenges are still there. You have high interest rates going to 2025, and Powell basically said they're going to stick around for a while at these levels. And that's today you have historical low credit spreads. And if I'm correct that the recession is starting, those credit spreads are going to widen, which means at a given level of treasury yield, your mortgage rates and auto loan rates and credit card rates are going to go up. The risk taken today in the economy is extreme levels. The rate premiums that investors are asking to loan their money to mortgage borrowers or auto loan borrowers are decades lows. And on the other hand, you're seeing delinquencies rise already, especially on the credit card side. And you have a Fed now that says rates are going to stay for a while. So in response, I mean, I don't know if people realize this, but literally the day after the Fed, the night of the Fed press conference is when Tesla introduced this new round of incentives, because they know the demand for these vehicles are going to stay low for a while, and the resale values are going down again at a more rapid pace than the industry averages. So, and now on top of that, you have the Cybertruck issues too. They're looking around introducing Cybertruck in other markets. Um, they added free lifetime supercharging. So they're literally, I mean, as far as I understand, that can be worth tens of thousands of dollars. And for anybody who's been around for more than 10 years in Tesla, they know. I mean, some of people in the space already have they have Model S's with free lifetime supercharging. We already know how much people hold on to those cars. Forget AI3, AI4 hardware. They don't care. They want the free lifetime supercharging. They hold on to it forever. They abuse it forever. And now you're adding it to a vehicle that can also charge your home. I mean, what kind of level of demand must they be seeing to pull that lever? Machine.
Luckily for Meta, we live in one of the greatest cherry picking areas of the country. And I'm going to drive him down to Gilroy next May and put him on a 20-foot ladder so he can pick cherries from the biggest tree in Gilroy, because he is the biggest cherry picker I have ever seen.
I picked the same cherries you picked, man. If you didn't like it when you were picking the cherries, you shouldn't like it when I did it.
I mean, this guy loves to go take the FSD beta tracker and go focus on California, Washington. Look at
Yeah.
these specific
People,
states.
who's this guy?
Meta.
Oh, dude, what people, I mean, I've seen that have done many times in tweets and stuff. What people don't realize is that you need tens of thousands of miles and preferably thousands of entries from hundreds of people. So even the nationwide data is kind of like barely at that level. So the more you dig into any sort of state or rainy day, sunny day, whatever, you're an order of magnitude, if not two orders of magnitude, fewer data than where you need to be making reliable decisions. So the only thing that FSD tracker is good for right now is nationwide data. Go ahead.
I disagree because there was a space where Grant was making a claim. Now he's got selective memory and he's forgotten. But I asked him how many miles he needed. At the time, the tracker didn't have this many miles, and he was saying 2,000 miles was the bare minimum. And the argument has been, if you see even one intervention, then it's clearly not ready, right? And so if you can use the same data to say no, then you could start looking at the data and say it's no longer a no. It doesn't mean yes, but it means it's no longer a no. So if the data continues to track at the pace that it's tracking, if you don't see critical disengagements in California and Texas, which, by the way, you've never seen with previous models, that's pretty impressive. We're at 2,000 miles now. As more miles get collected, you can go there. But what I'm trying to really point out in that tweet is, one, it's really dumb when Tesla Q looks at the same data and says it's now enough data to make a conclusion, and then later on that same data is not enough to make a conclusion when they don't like the conclusion. And two, it's important to look at state by state. It doesn't matter if there's not enough data for it. Look at anecdotal, look at however, but looking at nationwide is muddying the actual way that it's going to roll out. It doesn't make a difference if it doesn't work. If it doesn't work in Canada, who cares? The tracker has data from Saskatchewan. Who cares?
Yeah.
No. If
Okay.
you
Machine.
were looking at a data sheet that just had California and it was reporting great results, a proper data scientist would say, hey, I don't know how this performs outside of California. I bet it's going to be worse. And therefore, even though it's great in California and it's making progress, that doesn't mean it's going to be robust enough across the rest of the world until I see that data. And the FSD beta tracker is essentially some sort of insight in showing you some of the data in the rest of the US and showing you that it doesn't perform as well. And what that means is simply, while it's making progress, that it's not at a level where it's ready to deploy for robotaxi. The results in California are not the same in other states. And ultimately, it really depends on what question are you asking and trying to answer. And to me, it's the question of, when will this thing be robust enough to be deployable as robotaxi in a lot of the US? And you need that data, even though it's not that much and different across different geographical areas. And to me, that's, assessing back to the reason you pointed out was in this context of my conversation about hardware. And if you want something to work well across the US, you're going to have to get it to improve above the level it is now still, I think, even if California is great. So, that was my point. And I think, I see Grant in the audience, and I don't want to post anymore, because every time Meta and Grant somehow get involved in the same thread, it's just, then they get in this tit for tat, and it's literally like 50 tweets tit for tat at each other. And this is like more mentally exhausting. I think it would actually exhaust an LLM. It would just be done with their chatting back and forth. It'd be like, I quit.
I think the problem is you think California and Texas are not a large part of the United States. It's 20% of the population.
That's not what I said.
You said the question is, when will it work for a large part of the United States? And I'm saying, if you look at California and Texas and just focus on California and Texas, that's a large part of the United States.
No, but that's my point is, in this context of, will Tesla have a robotaxi level software operating so they can deploy this across the US to work in many places, not just California? Then at what level of model complexity will be needed to do that. And you can look at this data and point to say, we're not there yet. That's all.
Are you now
And-
making the claim that it could work in California and Texas, but you will still hold the position that the hardware may be insufficient for the rest of the United States?
Yeah.
Okay,
Definitely.
you've modified. At least we're agreeing on 2 states now.
I mean,
I'll see you with the rest of the US.
I
It's
think you
definitely
guys can
possible.
you guys can also probably agree on the idea that just because it works in US, we have no idea how it's going to behave internationally too.
We do, because you can build a different model for the other states. Like once it's provable that the model peripherals and vision and compute capacity is sufficient, it's sufficient because model compression is continuing to progress. In 2 years from now, the same hardware is going to be 10 to 100 times more capable.
Okay, Grant.
Yeah, a couple quick things. So first, Yaman, congrats, respect for being willing to change your mind on things, and then congrats on the success of your more recent Tesla investing. Just briefly, because I don't want to get too far into it, but I mean, Meta, I really don't agree that I said 2,000 miles. I mean, maybe like that would be a benchmark. I just don't like you putting words in my mouth. You're welcome to do the research and find it if you're insistent that I said that. I don't believe that I did. I've generally been of the opinion that it's like a 20,000 mile hurdle for true robotaxi status. And then I would just say, agreed 100% with Machine. This guy is a champion cherry picker and goalpost shifter.
Okay, Robert.
Happy New Year, Yaman. My robot drove me through 3 states. I'm in Seattle, Washington. Has nothing to do with Texas or California. It works great here.
Okay. Machine, how are you positioned? How are you positioned into this deliveries report?
I've been really healthily, mostly middling around index funds, which is going well. I did open some short call position on Tesla 2 weeks ago, I think, out of the money, like in the 500s. Actually, I have one that's expiring Friday. So, yeah, I mean, those are fine. I'll make some money on them. But, that's just like 5% portfolio or something like that. So, in the fervor but of people, I don't know, the congrats, and the stock went up a massive amount. But, at this time, it was definitely technically getting overbought, high IV, and I thought would be a good time to have a little bit of a call out of the money call position. From here, who knows? I mean, obviously, you think things are going to go down. I don't know. Tesla's healthily valued. Let's just say that.
I think the intrinsic value of the company is about $600 billion. But I also think there's going to be a recession, and I think the recession is starting. And in a recession, there's no telling what these high P companies stocks can go. It can swing the other way. So, Machine.
I think it's my favorite thing the last few months is people saying that PE ratio or earnings doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah, I know.
No, it's always
Man.
mattered.
I mean, dude, listen, it's not even Tesla bulls that believe that. Like I participate in another space in the mornings now. And the host of that space is actually in listening mode right now. He's welcome to come up. And it's a great space, right? Great space. I really appreciate the kind of vibe in this space. It's fun. And I learned a lot too. But the space has a very different focus. It's very short term. I mean, these are day traders. And at most, they may hold their positions a couple of days, which is an area I'm trying to get better at. But even in that space, I bring up, okay, Tesla has a price to free cash flow ratio of 400. And the immediate response is not that they're focused on doing this analysis, but the immediate response is, well, Tesla never traded on multiples. Well, I don't think that's necessarily true. I think that we're in it, like I said earlier when we were talking about Trump administration, we're in a very different environment today than we were in the last decade in terms of macroeconomics. So I think this is the time PE ratios start or price to free cash flow ratios start mattering? Machine?
I just don't get this concept overall. I mean, I think people feel like they're just discovering investing for the first time, and they're trying to explain it to everyone else when they say, "Oh, it doesn't. This stuff doesn't matter," because they found some companies that it quote doesn't matter. It's not true. In the Bay Area, we're very familiar with startups, early stage. After raising multiple rounds. Do you think those companies are based on PE ratios? They don't make any money. So of course they're not just based on PE ratios of what they made. They're based on future value of what future earnings are going to be discounted backwards. And all these companies essentially, most companies operate on those same principles. It's just about how early are you, and how far in the future are you trying to project. And what's interesting for public companies is this idea of forecasting heavily in the future, and that's what's more risky, but also becoming maybe more common. Tesla is the mother of all stocks for that. But what's interesting to me is so much now, because it's at such a high PE ratio, indicates so much, or a lot of the future growth is being counted in right now. I mean, you're talking about a highly successful robotaxi business is being counted into the stock.
Let me ask you something. What do you think is the PE ratio of Tesla today?
Based on what definition of earnings?
Well, I'm asking you.
Well, are you talking about
That's
GAAP,
part of the question. That's part of the question.
non-GAAP, trailing 12
Part of the
months? They had this one-time tax benefit from last
Right.
year.
Yeah.
So, I don't know what it is right now. Like, just go looking at what it says on Google. Is it like 120?
It's
But whatever it
110
is,
according to GAAP earnings, but like you said, there's a one-time tax benefit
Yeah.
in the fourth quarter of last year, which should be removed for
right.
calculating PE ratio. And so you're looking at something like 150, 200 times. And if you look at price to free cash flow, you're looking at few hundred times price to free cash flow. And the normal is going to be around 20, 30 times. So I think you're looking at a company that's potentially overvalued by 10 times today.
I'm not going to say 10 times. I get where you're coming from. If you were ultimately looking at the steady state value of the company, eventually, once all these technologies either come to fruition or not, right, the PE ratio is going to be much lower, 20, 30, et cetera. Doesn't mean it's going to go there right away, and it could be a much larger company before that happens. But what I would say is so much of future potential earnings are counted in right now. It's hard to see what the reward to risk ratio is holding it right now, expecting it to 2x or 3x in the short term seems quite unlikely. So if I were, this is the same thing that happened in 2021, and that's when I, was all in on Tesla and then went not all in significantly because I looked at what the valuation was discounting backwards. I was like, wow, it's counting in basically awesome profits for many years. And so I said, what else is there at this point to hold on to? So I sold, which was a good decision. Now it's back and even higher a bit. And I just asked people to evaluate and say, what is it valuating right now that you need to hold on to for the next year or two? Did you just get the robotaxi future right now in valuation? Maybe you already got it.
Meta?
Before this is a slight switch in topic, but I think it's worth pointing out. Machine would probably agree with this. Being from the Bay Area, he knows the best investment is Fisher Price. They make those bubble machines, and I think in the Bay Area, it's huge demand right now. So, but on the FSD valuation, credit where credit's due. I was in a space with Magic, and he asked the question of like, if you look at Uber's valuation, which could be depressed knowing robotaxis are coming, etc. But if you look at its valuation as a market cap and you multiply that out, how much more efficiency could Tesla get? How much more of the TAM could they get? How much are you baking in that there's going to be people that start using taxis as opposed to using their own personal vehicles? Yeah, you can start seeing if all you're valuing Tesla on today is the car business and FSD, which is the way I'm looking at it. it does seem like it's getting there. Maybe another 2x tops, but yeah, it does look like it's there, in my personal opinion.
Steven.
Hey, Iman. Thanks for having me on. Two quick questions. One is about 6 months ago, you were talking about the Optimus folding clothes. I just didn't know if you were actually serious about that, sir. And then two is with Tesla sales. I just was wondering your opinion now. Do you think we're going to continue to see increasing sales in the US, not China, but just in the US? How do you think Tesla sales are going to do next 12 months? Your opinion. That's it. Thanks, sir.
I don't know what you mean by Optimus folding clothes. Am I serious? I think the reliability of AI systems is just taking longer to improve and more difficult than I originally expected. And that applies to FSD and Optimus both. Next 12 months, I think Tesla sales are going to be about the same as this year. So that will be 3 years of 1.8 to 2 million vehicle sales, basically.
Okay, and then just the other part was, did you think there was an actual like market for those robots, sir? That's what I was trying to ask. Did you think there was demand for those?
I mean, if they can do it, like 99.99 times out of percent of the time, then of course there's yeah. I don't want to fold my fucking clothes.
All right, thanks.
Yoda,
Hey, what's up, Yaman?
good. What's new?
Not much. I just saw that you were hosting space. I wanted to jump on and say Happy New Year's Eve.
You too. Meta.
I think Machine dropped, but I was going to ask him what he thinks about the 12 release coming out and its impact on hardware. But at the end of the day, I think we've already kind of discussed this to the end. Like if you're just looking at it from a stock perspective, the hardware through hardware for conversations not relevant if the stock has run to the point where it's pricing in FSD.
Okay. Hold on.
Is he still in the space? I can't see him.
No, I don't. I don't think he's. I don't know if he's in the space, but he's not on the speaker board. All right. Can we talk more NVIDIA, please, Meta?
Sure.
What do you think is the true value of NVIDIA today? Meta?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to answer true valuation. Like, if we break down segments where NVIDIA will continue to have an impact, I think like Qualcomm, like Intel, NVIDIA doesn't go to zero. I want to make that very clear, right? Like they're going to still have like a lot of chips when people start to go make robots. They're always going to be a provider of goods in that sense. If NVIDIA can get some data centers constructed that have their own chips, they could start competing with, Amazon and Microsoft and others. But the problem is they need not just their own chips for hardware, for AI compute, they'd also need CPUs. They also need to build all the APIs. They need to build all the offering. They need to be globally distributed because, otherwise the clientele they're going to cater to is going to be very limited. Yeah, I don't know where the market tops off, but I think Nvidia rode a wave of gaming that kind of died out. Then crypto came in, right timing. Then AI came in. Maybe they find another wave, but the only thing I can see coming next is, edge compute, and they are focused on robotics and stuff like that. That could be a thing, but I would bet in Chris Latner's vision more than Jensen's personally. I think people are just going to have custom chips. AI is going to continue progressing really fast, and you won't need the best chip to have a good robot.
Yeah. Okay, Robert, and then I'm gonna ask a question to Meta.
I don't think NVIDIA is going to get in competition at the retail level with other people. Jensen is a platform thinker. He builds platforms for other companies to build on top of, and that's going to be real interesting over the next year or two. There's 5 new holodecks coming next year from companies like Unity and others that are going to organize your robots and do a lot of things like entertainment. Hollywood is investing in companies in this space. So there's a lot of movement coming, and NVIDIA's long-term health has to do with Omniverse, which is their platform for building holodecks and controlling robots and autonomous cars. So I think they're going to do just fine over the long term. Short term, I can't read the short term right now. It's such a hot company, and there's so much demand for its products that I keep hearing about. Today, I'm having lunch with the first investor in
Sure.
Starbucks. He's investing in a ton of companies that are going to buy NVIDIA cards. So I can't play the short term game. You guys might make some money as it goes up and down, and there might be a recession coming. Great,
Thanks,
but long
Robert.
term, it's a big deal.
Robert, you're sick. You need to load up on oranges, get lots of sleep, and drink a lot of water.
I've been driving a lot. I've been seeing robot companies and all sorts of stuff here in Seattle,
Yeah.
Washington. So
Yeah. All right. Well, short whatever company Robert visited because they're gonna get sick. All right, Meta.
I think the one thing for sure that's going to happen with NVIDIA is margin compression. I think the market has grown a lot, but the pace at which people have been buying chips, and I know people look at like the Tesla curve and they're going to buy all these chips, they're going to buy all these chips. Tesla's building out its data center. I don't think companies that have existing data centers are going to continue to buy at that same clip. And I don't know how many more companies need to build data centers the size of Tesla's. So I do think there will be a drop off soon, maybe a year or two out, where NVIDIA demand will drop. Granted, I didn't account for XAI and Tesla buying this many chips. I thought Dojo would be successful. So
Yeah, let's talk about that. What do you make of what do you think is the future of Dojo today?
a slow death.
Yeah. What do you think is the future of 4680s?
Those I think will be successful. I think the Dojo will have a slow death because its only purpose is to keep the negotiation power there, to keep it running, to be able to better negotiate. I think, and then the 4680s, it's not. They didn't make it for negotiation purposes, right? They made it for the purposes of being able to actually build the batteries. I think until that, I forget where in Texas they had another plant they were making for a lithium refinery. Once that refinery comes online, if 4680 doesn't scale at that point, I'll call it dead. But I think what's holding it back right now is the lithium supply, is my guess.
But lithium prices have dropped to levels that some thought was impossible. Lithium price today, let's see, is at 75,000, and they went as low as 70,000 and yuan per ton.
But that's unrefined, right?
Right. But I mean,
The-
there's no shortage of lithium batteries in the world right now.
I thought there was still a shortage of refined lithium.
I don't know. My understanding is that the the battery production, there's a lot of they run the lines at 50% is my understanding, but I don't know.
Okay.
And,
Okay.
and
I did actually want to ask you a question on this topic. Do you remember, like, at the beginning of last year, there was a period of time we thought the prices were going to come down, or the COGS was going to come down a lot because lithium prices had plummeted even at that time.
Mhm.
And then there was an earnings call where I remember um, they said something to the effect of it takes time for the thing to work through the system, and because they had contracts at spot price or whatever, they're not buying at
Mhm.
spot price, they're buying at the contracts.
Mhm.
Do you think we're going to continue to see that COGS decline, or do you think we already
Yeah,
saw it in Q3, Q4?
no, we'll see COGS decline. This will be true for Tesla and Rivian and others as well. Like that's not anything new.
Do you know how
It
significant that is to the cars?
Yeah, it's very significant. I mean, that I think by my estimate that added a couple $1,000s per unit when the prices surged, and I think we see maybe like half of that come back down. So maybe we'll see another half come down, but that's another 1,000. So that's like another 2-3% improvement in gross margin. I think Tesla's gross margin will improve. Like let's say, assume for a second FSD take rate stays the same. I think Tesla's gross margin will improve to 20s again. But this stock is priced as a lot more than that. Like that doesn't make much of a difference. Let's say, for example, you sold 2 million cars next year, and you make another $1,000 on each one because of the battery costs and other cost improvements. That's $2 billion to the bottom line. And today, that's per year. Today, Tesla's doing about $1 billion per quarter, so $4 billion a year. So you improve your profit. That's, by the way, that's pre-tax. But let's say they all drops to the bottom line for whatever reason. You got all the credits and stuff. You got the DTA. So that's $6 billion of profit. Let's say your energy ramped, like we're talking now 2026. Shanghai ramped, and you're making a few $1 billion there too. On the energy side, so it's 10 billion profit. But robotaxis and Optimus, in my opinion, are 5-10 years away, if not longer. So at scale, nationwide scale. So what's the value of a company that makes $10 billion a year cash? It's not 1.5 trillion. So that's why I have 200 billion in automotive and 200 billion in energy. That's $400 billion, generating $10 billion annual cash. So that's 40 times, which is in line with what Meta and the other Max 7 do. And I love the replies when people tell me, well, one of those companies is an AI company. Well, okay, like Meta is not an AI company. Tesla is. Nvidia is an AI company. Tesla is. Or Microsoft is an AI company. Tesla is. Like these replies that I get sometimes, like, geez, Luis. And I'm still giving $200 billion of value to Optimus and robotaxis, which I think is over generous at this point, because even the technological feasibility is uncertain, let alone scale. And people tell me, well, Tesla has manufacturing prowess. BYD doesn't have manufacturing prowess. So
I think the biggest problem with a lot of what people are saying is, in my personal opinion, as soon as you solve real world physics, and we've talked about this in the past, if you can get real, I know I always struggle to say this, real world physics at high fidelity in software, everything with manufacturing can be solved. And when you look at the new models coming out with Sora and Vio, they can do physics simulation pretty damn well, and they have never been in the physical world. They can't do high speed stuff. They have certain glitches in certain areas, but if you can get to a point where you can ask a model, even if it takes a week, it takes 2 weeks, a month of processing, and it outputs the most efficient line layout given a factory and all the constraints and where to go get your supplies and everything. It can tell you how to make a vehicle line. OpenAI, Google, Anthropic could leapfrog every manufacturer, whether it's for robotics or for cars.
exactly. So, and I'm not saying that will be the case. What I'm saying is that the future of these things are highly uncertain. So you can't assign to a business line that doesn't even have the production units ready $1 trillion valuation, especially when you're forecasting. I mean, at least in my case, you're forecasting a recession. When in that situation, PE ratios matter the most if a recession happens. So, yeah, I don't know.
If a
I guess we'll
recession
see.
doesn't happen, inflation could stay high and interest rates stay high. We know that's a headwind for vehicle purchases too. So Tesla's kind of facing two headwinds, right?
Yeah, if a recession doesn't happen, then you're looking at. I mean, I'm looking at a $600 billion intrinsic value in 2025. Let's say throughout 2025, just assuming Cybertruck continues to ramp, Shanghai Energy Factory ramps to volume, no problems, and they continue to make some progress around FSD take rates, but robotaxis and Optimus are 5-10 years away. Okay. If a recession happens, then a stock like Tesla, where you have 400 times price to free cash flow, you can't go down 90%. So you're looking at less than $100 per share. No
To put-
recession, $200 per share. A recession, less than $100 per share temporarily.
For playing devil's advocate purposes, what if, let's say, end of Q1, they ship a software update and it comes with robotaxi, it's an Uber-like app, and it's operating in Texas and California? What do you think happens?
Sorry, say that again.
What if at the end of Q1 there's
Mhm.
like an update, and there's a big what if. I'm not saying this is probable at all. I want to make that clear to anybody listening. I'm not saying this is going to happen. That's not a prediction of what's going to happen. Let's say at the end of Q1 they have Texas and California. They have like an Uber-like app. You go in your Tesla app, you can call a car, and customer cars that they put into the fleet, it just starts working tomorrow. That is like the most bullish case I can think of. How do you think that affects the market cap, the valuation, the intrinsic value of the company?
Mm-hmm.
Because at the moment they would have zero revenue, right? They just announced it.
Mm-hmm. Right. And this is statewide, Texas and California, not just two
Yeah.
cities.
Yeah, I'm assuming statewide.
Hmm.
The specific reason, I can go into why I'm asking the question too, if you prefer that.
Okay, go ahead.
The reason why I'm asking is because I don't think it's probable they're going to go to every single state. I don't think the data supports it. I don't think the driving conditions necessarily support it. Even within those states, I think there will be restricted areas. They'll be limited to, like, San Francisco,
There's
LA.
so many
Let's see.
unknowns. There's so like even let's say assume, for example, Texas and California magically gets the robotaxi service, a software update to the existing fleet in those two states. What's the revenue share between owners and Tesla?
Exactly. It would have to be better than 30% because that's what Uber drivers get. Or sorry, 70% is what the Uber drivers get, right?
Let's say 50-50. Okay. And let's say, man, like honestly, I just can't imagine in my wildest dreams that Tesla has a robotaxi service approved by the California governor across state.
Well, the governor doesn't have to approve it, so that's just the reality. They've already, unless they change a law by passing a different law, that there's already a pathway.
Which they can do, right?
They could, yeah, they could. But
Yeah.
let me see if I can describe it a different way.
I mean, isn't this the same guy that basically said, we're gonna have our own state EV credit and Tesla excluded?
Yeah, I mean, this guy's definitely corrupt. I'm not saying that there won't be political.
So let's say
stuff.
Texas first. So let's just say Texas.
Let's just say Texas. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So Texas, you have your Waymos in Austin already.
Let me see if I can give you a data point that I'm using
Mm-hmm.
from a Turo fleet. Granted, it's in California, about $1,000 a month in income for the cars. My assumption is anybody who can make money.
That's not gonna happen.
No, but my assumption is anybody who can make more money by putting their vehicles on Turo is not going to put their vehicles into the fleet. So the payout to those customers has to be higher than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, the robotaxi service is going to face competition from likes of Turo and Uber, etc. Like just in terms of supply and also demand as well. And there's so many variables that's going to have to play out over the coming years after the robotaxi service is introduced. That I think we're going to find out what the bottom line contribution is to Tesla's financials. So an overnight software update, I just don't see the adoption being as fast as people think. That maybe there might be a pop in the stock, but I don't think the fundamental contribution will reach billions of dollars until years after that service is introduced. How about that? How's that answer? Meta?
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't hit the unmute button. I think that's a good answer. I was trying to back into.
But if
I
it's
think a
not
lot
then
of
if
people.
it's not in the billions,
No,
if
no,
it's not
I
in the
agree.
billions,
I don't think it's
then
gonna
it
be
doesn't matter.
crazy. Yeah, I don't think it's gonna be crazy influence to the stock. I think the only thing from there would be non-intrinsic hype. I agree with you on that.
I think we've passed the times of like look at GME. You have the guy coming out with meme after meme, and GM stock is not reacting at all. I think we passed those times. I think those times are behind us. I think it's a different regime today
I
than it was
agree.
in the last 10 decade. So I don't think people realize the pressure on the economy today.
Yeah,
There's a lot of downward pressure on the macroeconomy today.
I was saying something about how the credit card debts defaults are pretty high, and
Mhm.
there's a lot of signals that, like, the consumers have overspent. These are all, I think you're right.
So there's credit card, delinquencies are rising. There's a lot of government programs that are coming kind of offline, like student loan payments are resuming, I think, in stages, as far as I understand. People are feeling less secure about their jobs. People are finding a much harder time finding a new job once they're laid off today than they did. I mean, it's a day and night kind of situation today versus last year, even let alone 2 years ago. And so, and this is all happening before home prices start declining, which I think is also ahead of us. So, and that's the kind of like the main thing about household financials, their home equity, how they feel about how secure they feel about their home. So, and we've already started seeing cracks in the employment market, like an acceleration type of cracks in the unemployment rate, with major retailers going under, laying off tens of thousands of people, making headlines, across social media. People kind of feeling less secure about their own job once they find out somebody they know is losing their job. These are things just starting, and it's gonna, I think, snowball throughout the year. So, and then on top of that, I think like one thing I learned in the last few years is that people change behavior way, way slower than I ever imagined. And a Tesla owner adding their vehicle to a robotaxi network is going to be much harder than people realize. I think it's going to be a similar kind of situation where on Twitter, you have people saying, "Oh, it's perfect. I'm going to do it," and kind of falling over each other to order the next best thing, and some like bottle opener for $100,000 that they pay, versus the mass market that don't even know that these things are happening for years. So
There's still people right now who don't know what ChatGPT is.
I know.
And people don't realize
I
that.
know. I mean, for those of you who just joined, go to the YouTube channel, go back to the beginning where I told the story in Massachusetts, 2 stories. I mean, and like every single time I go into these conversations, I kind of start doing ChatGPT or kind of do something, and they're like, "What is that?" They don't even know what ChatGPT is, let alone like use it in their daily lives, and boggles the mind because it makes your life so much easier. Like ChatGPT or Gemini or Grok or whatever your favorite LLM is, it makes your life so much easier. It makes it make so much productive, even if you just use a free version, let alone use the $20 a month version. And but it's only like you look at the number of people who use it around the world. We have 8 billion people. At It's been 2 years since it came out, right? 2 or 3 years. Um, Number of people who use it in the few $100 million, they say a few 100 million people, like say 200 million people, and number of people who pay for it is like tens of millions of people, a fraction of the world that scales so easily, and it's clearly a value add to your life. A fraction of the world population does it, and you think people are going to go fucking buy $30,000-$40,000 cars?
There's also one other thing that I've often heard, a little hypocritical. You hear people say the Waymos look ugly, and the Teslas you can't tell, they look the same, and that's why people can choose Tesla over Waymo. And then the same people will argue that the Cybertruck is great because it brings a lot of attention. People ask what that is, and it brings brand awareness. I think you could argue a taxi looking like a robotaxi will draw more users than one that doesn't. Maybe.
All right, say that again. Say the last part.
I think a robo taxi that doesn't look like a normal vehicle will draw more users than one that doesn't.
Interesting. Why?
It's kind of like what Lyft did when they originally launched. They had these like obnoxious pink mustaches that their drivers put on the front of their cars.
Right.
And they drove around and everybody was like, what the hell is that car with a mustache? And then brand awareness was there. Same thing with Waymo. Like if you're trying to get people to actually download apps, maybe that works. But of course they have the other effect, the issue of a network effect, right? They didn't have enough vehicles. So the wait times are really, really high. So they have to partner with Uber so that they can only go after the fares that are local to them. So Waymo doesn't have enough vehicles. That's clearly their problem.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's a chicken and egg, right? Like, do you buy more vehicles or do you get more
I don't know
customers?
if not having enough vehicles is the problem, limited factor right now. I think it might just be that I think mapping new cities plus collecting enough data to verify the reliability to the city officials is taking longer than they realized.
I disagree with that because if that was the case, how come in the established cities where they already are, they haven't been like adding tons more cars?
Mm-hmm. User adoption.
Well, how come they haven't added more in Phoenix where now you order an Uber and every now and then a Waymo shows up?
Mm-hmm. Here's another thing that we discussed, Robert and I discussed many times in AI amateurs that I don't think I asked you yet. So over the last year or two, over the last year really, I've been realizing that humans have an inherent fear of using AI, even though they
Change
believe.
aversion.
Hmm?
It's called change aversion.
But I think this is a different type. Like I understand what you're saying. I think it's really hard to change human behavior, but I think this one is slightly different because I think this to them I think it's a bit of an existential fear. So it's not that they kind of like they kind of like going around their days, kind of habitual ways, and but I think they see AI as something that will replace them, that will make them useless, that will kind of eliminate their purpose for life. And if you kind of survey people, like, is this the case? I don't think you're gonna get the answer. I think where you got it, like what I found is ask somebody, about ChatGPT or Gemini or Grok, do you use it? Okay. No. Or maybe they use very little. Or maybe they think it's gonna take a while, etc. And we all know these things are already like, from an IQ level, better than average person, from reliability, availability, cost, etc., better than any expert. Like you can replace many experts in your life today. And but once you ask them, like you kind of show these facts to them, it kind of becomes a bit more deeper. You kind of start on, like, at least I've kind of seen um, the aversion is more existential and emotional and very strong versus, oh, I didn't know about it. I'm still going to go on with my day habitually. And maybe I'll test it out. And it's more like I want to use it. I don't want to talk about it. And coming from a fear perspective, I think. What do you think?
I think that existential threat is real. It's part of the reason why I'm very not bullish on like VR taking off, like in a very, very meaningful way. I think nerds love the idea of a holodeck or like, VR headset. I don't think that's actually the thing by the common population. But, new markets do come into existence. New generations, maybe eventually it'll be like a generational thing. Um, but when you say like people don't use AI, I think that again is a generational thing. As soon as like something is a competitive advantage, even when we don't like it, we start adhering to it. And I think that's kind of like why our food got as bad as it is in the US. Unless there's regulation preventing it, I think it's going to happen. I'm not sure what the timeline will be. It might be slow, but when your neighbor has a self-driving Tesla, you're going to get a self-driving Tesla.
Mm. Well, your neighbor has self-driving.
Yeah, because like I think keeping up with the Joneses is a more powerful force than survival force. Humans will collectively be the frog in a pot that boils and kills us. our survival instincts are not strong enough that we were willing to say, let's stop using fuel and switch over to EVs. EVs had to be sexier, cheaper, drive themselves, and then maybe people will switch. So I don't think survival instincts are as strong.
All right. I'll think more about that. When your neighbor gets a self-driving Tesla, you'll get a self-driving Tesla. So why is that not happening today?
Because people's neighbors can't afford it either. I would say in the communities where they can afford it, many people are buying it. But in the communities where they can't, and the cars are not self-driving yet, right? That's the other part.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it did really well in Austin. It does really well in Austin. And when I have conversations with people in Austin that are, tax savvy, high income, young, they still have an aversion to it. So I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that. I guess time will tell. We'll see.
Yeah, but you described an entire group of people. I'm saying like when some people in a group start to get it, everyone else in the group starts to get it.
I see. So it's just a matter of time, you're saying. FSD unsupervised. You're saying that if FSD unsupervised is introduced in Austin, then the buying decisions will reflect that. Vehicle buying decisions will reflect that milestone in a material way. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, there could be lag, but yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Okay. All right. What do you think
It's
about
that argument they make, right? Like slowly at first and then all at once. I think that's reality
Right.
what happens. That's what the S curve is. Like it's gonna be really slow and then suddenly everybody's gonna have it and you're gonna be like, what the hell? Where did all this stuff come from? It's like iPhone, right? Nobody had iPhones and then suddenly everybody had iPhones.
Right. What do you think about Mercedes increasing the speed limit for its hands off, eyes off system?
How much more than the speed limit is it allowed to go?
I don't know. I think it was like 70, 80 kilometers per hour or something. I mean, it's kind of like, it's a big jump. Obviously, it's not going to cater to everybody who's going 70, 80 miles an hour down the road or whatever, but it's a big jump. And I think what it shows is that just like Waymo is removing sensors, other players will increase or expand the operational domain of their services. So
Yeah,
there
I
are
agree with
more.
that generally. I agree with that general principle.
And it tells me that maybe Mercedes will not end up licensing FSD from Tesla.
Yeah, I've said this multiple times. I don't think anyone's licensing FSD from Tesla because it's too ingrained with the way the hardware is set. You'd have to set the cameras the exact same way. You'd have to have maybe similar driving profile dynamics. Like if your drag was significantly different, if the way the powertrain responded was different, it's just so much overhead to bring in a licensee. I don't think it makes sense.
BYD is adding LiDAR to $25,000 Seagull cars. What do you think about that?
Good marketing, probably a good way to get some additional value. I think Tesla still puts a radar in their S and X, right?
So you don't think that? So hold on. So okay, let me ask you in a different way. Let's say two people in China, two Chinese people, or somebody buying, deciding between the BYD car with LiDAR, $25,000 car, and a Model 3, let's say 20, 25, $30,000. That comes with FSD, vision only.
I think a good salesperson is going to sell them on the BYD and be like, it's got this extra LiDAR thing and it's great for you. And they're wrong, but they're going to do it anyway.
Performance wise, FSD is ADAS. Do you think BYD can match that?
With LiDAR, it'd be pretty quick to get there. Yeah.
Okay, so they can do it. Interesting.
Yeah. I'm not in the camp that Tesla's going to own the whole market. I've never been in that camp.
But I mean, if Mercedes have its own service, GM has the Super Cruise, BYD has its own service, then what's the value that Tesla is getting for spending billions of dollars in building training centers?
I think the FSD is required to sell the EVs. And I think Tesla's going to be, or I still hold the belief that Tesla's going to be the best manufacturer of EVs outside of China. I don't think Mercedes is going to get there.
Do you think Tesla will outsell BYD in international markets?
Outside of the US?
Mm-hmm.
It's a good question.
So outside the US, outside China, no home country advantage.
So like India is probably going to be more open to importing American cars than Chinese cars. There are many countries that have like, racial or political tensions with China. Hard to say for me. I mean, China tends to do really well on low cost, low labor, etc. But like, I think more and more of these factories are going to be low human labor. If I were to make a prediction, and this is pretty uninformed, I would say Europe and like more Western friendly countries go to Tesla, and then more Eastern friendly countries in the rest of the world goes to China.
I mean, why wouldn't Europe? I think I disagree on Europe. You have hundreds of millions of people who are more left than Newsom, and Elon is now sporting far right. Robert, can you mute yourself? Elon is sporting now far right political party in Germany, driving people even more against. And maybe in the longer term that'll pay off. Who knows, right? But in the near term, you're definitely getting a hit on your demand, and you have European automakers now introducing and expanding the operational domain of their own ADAS systems. So I disagree on
Fair
Europe.
argument.
Yeah. And I think in Australia, BYD is already outselling Tesla, if I'm not mistaken. I think Australia is a solid example for how international markets may pan out, because it's not China, it's not US. Unlike India, Australians have the per capita income to buy Teslas, and yet they're still choosing BYD.
I think on the lower end markets, for sure, that's going to be the case. You're right. I think Tesla will continue to sell, but it could be the case that Tesla gets pigeoned into luxury brand attempts, and then BYD could come out with actually more luxurious buttons and massage features and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, it's China's market to eat.
James?
Yeah, I just wanted to share some experience. I'm using Uber a lot here in Brazil, where I am temporarily. And if you go on Uber Black, the like highest tier, 50% of them are BYD. I haven't seen one Tesla. And I asked what the story is with the trend of so many BYD, and there's a factory here already, so they're literally building them like a couple hundred miles away. Like they've had huge market traction here. Like huge. I to be honest, I don't think I'd ever even seen the BYDs much at home in Ireland, and then all of a sudden I see them like every few minutes. They're everywhere. So just sharing that with you guys.
Okay. What country is this, James?
I'm in Brazil, in the northeast of Brazil. I'm pretty sure
Okay.
it would be the same over the rest of the country as well, though,
Okay.
because it's kind of like that here. So I'd say it's pretty much like that in Sao Paulo and everywhere else too.
Okay, thank you. All right. I was going to ask Meta one more thing. Okay. Now, energy.
Just as a heads up, I'm going to drop in about 15.
Okay, great. On energy, one of my pillars for my short position in Tesla is that Tesla energy margins in China will be lower, like materially lower than Tesla energy margins in the US, despite the fact that battery production costs and electricity costs, like energy costs and battery production costs in general, like lithium price and everything, and labor costs are lower. So I think cost to produce will be lower too. But I think revenue per unit will be so much lower that I think margins will be lower than in the US. And I think that's like primarily because of competition. I think CATL, BYD, and others in China will find it much easier to build a product that competes with Megapack than it's been to compete with against Tesla vehicles, because it's a much simpler product, and they already have the expertise in the country in China to build battery cells better than Tesla can. and the Megapack product is on a percentage basis more battery cells than a vehicle, Tesla vehicle is. And they've already proven that they can compete with Tesla vehicles. So why wouldn't they be able to compete to an even greater extent with Megapacks? So that's the
Yeah,
thesis around that. What do you think?
I think all else being equal, if we just look at it from an engineering first principles, if we remove politics out of it and the protectionism and all that stuff out of it, I think BYD has a very good chance of beating Tesla at the Megapacks. I think the margins are going to drop. Like whenever I see people say the margin can be 50%, I don't think that's realistic. There are a couple of big differences that I would point out. I think maybe the lithium price is falling right now changes the equation, but it could also be the case that, brine process is really, really slow. Electrolysis is the way you go. That might 5x your cost because now you're spending a lot of electricity to reverse osmosis and get everything out. Then your margin is going to drop really, really fast because like whatever portion lithium makes up of the battery, which is probably a lot of the battery pack, that part of your cost increased by a lot so that you can hit the volume numbers. So if Tesla goes that route, I could see the margins on that compressing really fast. And then if the margins have compressed really fast, now you're in like a margin race, and China tends to do better on those things. So yeah, I think BYD could do better. Warren Buffett's not an idiot. I believe he invested in BYD. You know, yeah.
I mean,
It's just
he's been divesting from BYD, and
oh,
I
has
think
he?
it was Charlie Munger who kind of invested in it. By the way, I also shorted Berkshire Hathaway
Oh
today.
wow, I wouldn't
Small
do that,
position.
but you do what you got to do.
Small position. Why wouldn't you do it?
I don't know. I don't short anything in general. I just sell covered calls when I do, or call spreads. But I don't know. I haven't done any research. It just is a shocking thing to hear. That's all. You've been more involved with it. Like I've been out of the stock space for a minute, as you are aware, right? Like my brain has just been occupied by the things.
Yeah, I think Berkshire Hathaway will find it difficult to survive after Warren Buffett.
Oh, that's what. Okay, I hear you. Yeah,
I mean that's part of it.
Understood.
Longer term part of it, and then the shorter term part of it is recession call. And I think Berkshire Hathaway stock is actually historically overvalued right now when you look at historical measures.
Interesting. I would think in a recession they would do well because they have so much cash usually.
Everything goes down in a recession. They might do
just do
relatively
better exiting the recession. Makes sense.
Yeah, they might do relatively better than other stocks, but I can't pile everything on a couple of shorts.
Out of curiosity, and then there's a personal bias in this. How do you feel about the real estate market? From a macro perspective.
Yeah, I think home prices are going to head down.
Good to know.
Um,
So if you were not shorting the market, you would basically just go into bonds and treasuries.
Right. Exactly. Yeah,
That's fair.
I'm struggling. I'm struggling to find long ideas. Like maybe Micron might be a good long for me because I have so many shorts in semiconductors. And Micron, I think, is relatively steeper versus other, and also like they were already cheaper and they got a big hit after their last earnings. And then they have a pretty good position on I think the competitive in the market. And then TSMC would be probably another one, but TSMC is not cheaply valued. So
yeah, but TSMC, out of everything that you've named, is the one that probably survives, right? Because even in a recession, I can't see anybody stopping their orders from TSMC because
I don't know.
good luck
And then
if you
you
get to
have
the
your
top of the line.
geopolitical risk and everything there too. Yeah, I would probably be in cash or treasuries.
Well,
Or some
houses
sort
you
of
can live in.
or some sort of like a investment grade bonds or something, corporate bonds.
Yeah, I think the difference is if it's your own house, you can at least live in it, right? It's
Right.
different.
Right. So yeah, I think housing market is not in a good. I mean, I shorted home builders, Toll Brothers, and made some money, but they came down so fast. Like in the month after I shorted them, they came down like 20, 30, 40%. So I closed that position out.
But congrats on the shorts.
Thanks.
Well, anyway, Happy New Year. Sorry I'm not in spaces as much. It's still fun and active to be on Twitter sometimes. I know I troll people. For those who follow me, sorry. It's just when I pop in, sometimes it's fun to do.
Okay. Sounds good. Happy New Year. ACDC, anything on your end about what we discussed?
No, sounds good. But just a quick, I just want to get your take on what do you think about Juniper's demand? Because everybody seems to be hanging their hat on that. And I think it's kind of like ill-timed to be releasing that with the headwinds of the macro environment. So I don't think it's like another Model Y moment. Is that what you're also thinking?
Yeah, Juniper, I think, you know, I think like the new Model 3 didn't really perform up to my expectations. And then the resale values of the old Model 3 sank. And I think if the resale values of the old Model Y sinks as much as the old Model 3 sank, then you're going to have a problem there, I think. And I mean, unless if there's something special about the Juniper that is kind of, I don't know yet. Who knows? Guess we'll find out. I doubt it though.
Well, to me, as a Model Y owner, one of the biggest attraction of the Juniper, and everything is, I think, still rumored, but is the slightly bigger battery. That would be a huge plus, but I don't think that they can, maintain the same cost level, especially with the Ys. The Ys have well, not significantly, but continuously been discounted this year. So if they go back to regular pricing, just on the Ys itself, without putting a premium for the Juniper, I think it slows down the demand on it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, let's see what the product is. I don't know. But the fact is, like, the primary reason why car sales across the world are struggling is the high interest rates and people feeling less secure about their jobs. So you can't call it Juniper, you can't call it Saturn. Those things are going to apply still.
Also, Yaman, wanted to point out one thing. You were kind of talking about NVIDIA. If you see the demand for these for the NVIDIA chips that came from the hyperclusters mostly, right? Another demand of these hyperclusters were cooling systems, and that's where you saw, the Carriers, the Lennox, the Virtus, and everybody kind of skyrocket. And if you look at those stocks recently, they've backed down significantly, and these are not tremendously high PE stocks, right? But they're still backing down. So I think even the construction of the data center, it's still going to, of course, increase, but not at the same rate as before, which kind of gives you a little preview into the demand for the chips also.
Yeah. Can you name those stocks again, please?
Yeah, so you've got, you want me to give you the tickers on them?
Sure.
Hold on one second. So Carrier is one, CARR.
Okay.
Lennox, LII.
Okay.
Comfort Systems, which is FIX.
Okay, so let's look at these three. So these are, you're saying, wow, look at Comfort Systems. That is wild. That rise is crazy.
Yeah, they
Okay.
rallied a lot going into this on the hype of the data centers,
Right.
and they have all pulled back.
Well, not that much though. They're kind of tracking with Nvidia, looks like.
Correct, but I'm saying that these guys, when you're building a data center way ahead of time, you're already placing your orders in for all of these systems, right? So their demand kind of slows down ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of just giving you a little preview of the pipeline.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm gonna look into these 3 companies and maybe we can discuss next time. All right. Well, that's probably all. We already went over to 2.5 hours. Happy New Year's Eve, everybody. Enjoy your evenings, and then we'll be back. Maybe tomorrow, maybe next day. We'll play it by ear. Thank you very much, and take care. I hope you all enjoyed your years, and Happy New Year. Bye.